Good evening and welcome to the People's Business. I'm your host for tonight, Anne-Marie Burke. Tonight's topic, we're looking at empowering communities through volunteerism, especially looking at disaster emergency management and our disaster emergency organizations. I'm joined tonight by two gentlemen. First, I'd like to welcome Station Officer Damian Bayne, who is from the Barbados Fire Service. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Anne-Marie. Good evening, Barbados.
And also joining me is consultant with Disaster Emergency Management, Mr. Selwyn Brooks.
Good evening.
Nice to meet you, gentlemen. So we will return shortly after the break and begin our discussion on volunteerism in regard to the disaster emergency management. Good evening and welcome back to the People's Business. As mentioned before, tonight we're talking about empowering our communities through volunteerism, and we're looking tonight at disaster emergency management and the disaster emergency organizations. Now, let me first start with you, Mr. Brooks. Say disaster emergency management for those persons out there who might not know or understand what I'm speaking about. When I say disaster emergency management, what does that encapsulate?
Generally speaking, it is the process in which people who reside in a country or community or whatever build a level of resilience to what is likely to happen to them, and is the whole overall process of coordinating, managing such a process. And that would include sensitizing persons in the community what can happen, engaging them to let them know what they could do or what they should not do, and also, more importantly, training persons so that they will be able to respond effectively. So it embodies, when we look at comprehensive disaster management, a holistic view and approach to how we manage and respond to any hazard that come our way. And that would lead generally to a better response and a shorter recovery process after the impact.
Now, I'm sure that this obviously is a network of services. So you have the disaster emergency organizations, and this is where Damian, you come in. Of course, the Barbados Fire Service is integral in that particular system. How do you function within terms of disaster emergency management?
Well, we form part of the overall framework as it relates to emergency response. And obviously, our overall mission is to protect the lives, property, and the environment of those who live, work, visit, or invest in Barbados. So while that is our primary mandate, one of the ways we achieve that is through public education. And that is where our interaction with the DEOs, that will be going through the event that we're going to speak on later, we engage with them to train them in basic fire safety. Fire safety is very important within the community because we could appreciate that we have an aging community too. So if you have persons on the ground who are trained in these areas that can mount a response before the fire service gets there, then at least you may have saved predominantly lives and maybe property as well. So that is how we fit into the framework of emergency management, or one of the ways that we fit into the framework.
Now, we know we spoke of the fire, of course, but Mr. Brooks, what are some of the other organizations involved in the DEM?
Well, the DM works in collaboration, as I said, the fire service, the Barbados Defense Force, the Red Cross, of course, the district mercy organizations, and more, especially when we look at comprehensively, all of those agencies that we have the potential to be impacted, and therefore, by allowing persons like the National Disabilities Unit, the Council of the Disabled, and all of those other, the Red Cross and the St. John Ambulance Association, and various community groups as well. And by doing so, you bring in persons into the sphere of knowing exactly what can happen and what part they can play. Because everybody should now see disaster management as their business. Just how we coin the phrase, tourism is everyone's business. As a small country, if we are impacted severely, it means that a significant number of our population can be impacted. And we will want to maintain the standard of living that we have achieved over the years. And how can we do that? How we can do that is by empowering persons in our respective communities to understand what they need to do, offer them training so that they are able to do it competently, so that everybody fits into the picture and you have a holistic response, knowledge in terms of what needs to be done. A lot of people talk about climate change, a lot of people talk about climate resilience, whatever. It all fits into the sphere of what we are expected to know and do to prevent, reduce, and to recover as quickly as possible.
I know quite often persons might think the DM only springs into action or you have something like an approaching hurricane or a natural disaster, but what are some of the other areas of disaster management that we do look at?
The Department of Emergency Management role is a 365-day job. You don't wait until something happens to see how and what you need to do. So there's overall engagement with all of the entities to make sure that there's this cohesiveness in terms of an interoperability. Because even if you train as an individual unit, it's a different scenario when you bring people together. So that is key. And I think the Department of Emergency Management's role is to see how we can engage all parties, and so that when we have to come together to effectively mount a response, every person can work together cohesively towards the common goal. So it is not that we wait until something happens. And that engages an all-year-round training program in the various disciplines, all year-round engagement, and knowing exactly that persons understand what the SOPs are, what are their standards of training that you would like to attain, and more importantly, how can we get all of the various sectors to build their own emergency management protocols and processes within their individual establishment. So that is an all-year-round initiative.
Now, Mr. Bayne, he spoke about training. I know persons might think you only zero in on fire training at the fire service. What are some of the other areas that you do training as well?
So within our department, in addition to fire safety, we would also engage with the DEOs in other areas that they would deem necessary to meet their particular goals. So for example, we would have assisted in the basic knot tying, manual stabilization of patients in the event of a disaster. There are a number of different areas that we go into. It all depends on what their requirements are. But generally, for the public, it all comes down to the use of the extinguisher, how to properly use the fire blanket, and any other area that we can assist.
I also realize that if you go to many mega events that we have, you usually see the presence of the Barbados Fire Service. What is your role at those events? I see you at the FETs, I see you at some of the national events as well. What is your role at those mega events where you have multiple persons in attendance?
Yes, so we are there to ensure that the event and the environment is fire safe. So in the event that persons are using open flame, so we will go around to the different stalls to ensure that they have their extinguisher, that it was serviced within the last year. We will also ensure that they know how to use it. But generally, overall, We are there to ensure that the event itself is safe, and not just fire safe, but safe in general.
Okay. Now we are going to lead a bit into volunteerism, and we do know that there are also DMs within the communities. So for you, Mr. Brooks, how do you allow persons to join these organizations? What is it like for me to be a part of that community element of disaster management?
The district mercy organizations are aligned to the constituency boundaries. So we have 30 constituencies. That makes provision for 30 district mercy organizations. Any person who resides in any of the constituencies are free to make themselves known that they will like, and we will take it from there in terms of enrolling persons and offering them the different level of training that is required. Currently, we have listed approximately just under 1,000 members throughout the country. Obviously, in any organization, some units will function at different levels. It is voluntary, and that has a great capacity in terms of how we can engage the various persons who reside in the various communities. So all organizations will not function at the same level. But what we have done over the last 3 to 4 years is to zone the 30 district emergency organizations into 5 zones. And by doing that, each zone can then draw on the individual skills, capacities, and effectively mount a response if needed. For argument's sake, if something happens in St. James South or St. James North, there are 3 DOs in St. James. So you can see how there can be that collaboration, because when you put on the DO shirt, no one is going to ask you which DO you're from. It is one organization that happens to meet just how we have the fire service, who has several fire stations. We have 30 units, and they function primarily responsible for the geographical space in the confinement of those constituencies. But within the zonal concept, you can broaden that response so that you can bring more capacity to bear on an incident. However, if Barbados is impacted, it means that we come together, look and see the areas that have been impacted, try to determine what resources will be needed, and see how we can bring those resources as quickly as possible to that area, even although it is a constituency, but you still have the collaborative effort coming from the members of the respective zones.
Okay, so you spoke about the zones, and from your end, how you cover the various parishes or constituencies. Damian, from your end, I'm not sure if everybody would know how many fire stations we do have, how many appliances, how many units. So right now, how is the fire service spread across the island?
So the fire service is divided into 3 divisions: the Northern Division, the Central Division, and the Southern Division. The Southern Division is made up of the Airport Fire Station and the Worthing Fire Station. Central is made up of the Bridgetown Port, which is the newest fire station, Bridgetown Fire Station, and St. John Fire Station, and the North is made up of Arch Hall. I would say, I believe altogether we may have just over 200 personnel, but we respond first according to the location where the call would have came from, in the specific location, but it does not mean that if the call came in from the north, that you may not get a response from the south.
Okay.
So it really depends on what type of call it is and the resources that are required.
Okay, now we do have our first caller. Good night to you.
Good night, good night. How are you doing? Hello, good night.
Hello, sir. Good night.
Yeah, hi, good night. I have a couple of questions for the panel, please.
I'm sorry, we're unable to hear you. So as we work on that technical element to our program, I need to touch a bit more on the various locations that you do have. You said South, North, and Central.
Yes.
So how do you said they can interfunction with each other, but in terms of appliances, like how many appliances are available? Do you ever have a shortage, or do you have adequate appliances?
At this time, we have adequate appliances. Bridgetown Station would be considered a big station, so that would have 2 appliances. The airport is off by itself on the airport compound. So they have 3 crash tenders, and they're slightly different in terms of build and makeup and what they do and how they function in comparison to the water tenders that you will see traversing the roadways. The smaller stations have 1 water tender, and then there are 2 rescue tenders in service, 1 at Archall and 1 at Bridgetown. So we have adequate resources to respond to anywhere in the island at any given point in time.
The Jaws of Life, is it still that one particular unit that is responsible for the Jaws of Life, or have you extended that at this stage?
No, that is extended across the length and breadth of the department. That equipment is available on every truck. Every officer is trained in the use of the equipment, so that capacity is always there, ready and available.
Okay, and Mr. Brooks, do you think the DOs at this point are functioning as you would like them to?
Me personally, I think we can do a lot more because there's always room for improvement. But that all depends on person's time that they will have, the person's perception as to what their role is or what their role could be, and that would vary from person to person. But I would think we're not doing as bad as maybe one would think. But it does not mean that there's not room for improvement. Because I live on a daily basis with the premise that we will be impacted someday. And that is maybe because of my level of training and exposure I've had over the years. But that does not mean that everyone will have the same way of seeing it as I do. And I'm quite certain Officer Bayne will have a similar concept, because in disaster management, the only hazard, or should I say the hazard that gives you the most opportunity for a warning, is a hurricane. So that means that if you are going to mount an adequate response at the community level, it means that the DOs would have to continue to raise the level of their engagement and capacity so that when the other hazards, not the hurricane, that you have warning and watches or whatever, if a tsunami, if a volcano, if, God forbid, and I think this is where Mr. Bayne may come in, if an aircraft goes down en route to the airport, that is not something that you can have 20 minutes notice of. So I mean, to answer your question in a meaningful way, it will now call for more engagement and for DOs to engage their various communities and to seek the resources that lie within those respective communities and see how we can bring them on board. And also to access the level of training that is being offered so that they can build the knowledge which will lead to the capacity that is required. But I'm optimistic. We have made significant progress over the last 5 to 6 years. And I'm anticipating that 2025 will bring a new era. When I say a new era, a new awareness as to the role and function of the district mercy organizations. And with the continued support from the fire service, the BDF, the police, and all of the other response agencies, I think we will be able to accomplish a higher level of capacity and response.
Okay, well, we're going to stick a short pin here in our discussion and return with more after the break. and welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we're talking about empowering communities through volunteerism, especially looking at disaster emergency management. Now, before the break, we did have a caller, so that person is back with us. Good evening.
Yes, hi, good evening, Amri. How you doing, Mom?
Hi, good evening.
Yes, hi, good evening.
Yes, you can join us in the discussion. We're looking at disaster emergency management.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, Mom. A couple of questions, please, for the panel. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to be thanking the production team for taking my call. Now, in terms of when people volunteer and y'all get negative reviews, I know these reviews aren't the end of the world, but they can spell disaster if you don't know how to respond properly. So I just wanted to know if you could answer. And the other question is, what about the fact when you're trying to volunteer, not only time but heart, the aspect of volunteering, not only time and effort but heart and passion to create for your marketing aspect, to create so that everybody, as you said, that it would be their business as well, that it would be not only tourism will be a business, but indeed that this fantastic initiative and program is our business, and it will be, why isn't there a program examining these particular volunteering solutions based on the aspect of these other natural disasters? Thank you very much. Have a good night. Bye bye.
Okay. Let's address the first question. Reviews. You do have feedback, both of you, along, especially after facing the natural disaster. I'm sure, Beryl, you would have gotten a lot of feedback as to how you responded. So let me start with you, Mr. Brooks. The caller wants to know, how do you deal with the negative reviews?
Negativity is something that we have to live with because you will never be able to please everyone. However, we can turn certain aspects of negativity in a positive light. What may have happened to an individual, if you can speak to that individual and let them know maybe if what they could have done, if they had access and take heed to the information that was put out, or how can we turn it around and let them use their misfortune as an opportunity to turn that negativity into a positive solution. Volunteerism is not something of late that is very popular. You may hear, as we go into the various communities, oh, this is the district emergency organizations, the voluntary and voluntary, you're talking about, are you looking for money? That may be one aspect of how people may see it. But I share the view that no government or no one will ever be able to give you what you want when you need it and at the time that you need it. So there must be some level of volunteerism on everyone's part. So how can you share your skills, your resources to your community that will help build that level of resilience at a national level? How can you impart the knowledge that you have gained? In each community there is a wealth and a dearth of resources that is there. The district emergency organization is therefore challenged with the various opportunities to see how we can use those resources and bring them into the sphere of what we do in terms of offering community resilience. So negativity is something that we have to accept. Everyone will not see it in the same way that we do it. But if we look and live and see how the emergency services function, we have to recognize that we all have to play our part and make sure that Barbados remains a lovely country that we know it to be.
Well, I think the caller steered our discussion into the element of volunteerism tonight. And Damian, from your end, I know you usually see in the U.S. system where persons are able to volunteer with their fire service. Is that allowed here in Barbados, and do you have that option?
At present, no. But if there is a skill set that you believe you can contribute or assist us with, be it, and not considering just firefighting, but you may have skills in IT, you may have worked in a jurisdiction before where you were involved in wildland firefighting or a skill set that we may not have in abundance, then I'm sure that the administration would consider using your abilities and your capacity. But one of the things that we have to realize too is that in the aftermath of anything, the community members are the persons who are there first. And volunteerism is important from the aspect where once something happens, you need persons on the ground who can respond. Obviously with limited scope because they're not first responders. But you can only have that type of response if there is community engagement and making it appealing enough for people to come into the agencies that are volunteer agencies. And I think that is where it needs to go, because the reality is that we are in a time where the opportunity to be impacted seems to be getting closer and closer. And you will need people on the ground to, for example, not necessarily to do anything, but the information that they may share about their communities after the impact is also important to DEM to help them mobilize their resources, the types of resources, and the level of response. So you need persons in the community who have an understanding of what is going on around them so that when they gather that information, they're then able to communicate, which is also one of the skill sets that they learn in the DEOs, how to use the portable radios and what's not. But the type of information that the commanders will need to mount a proper response and to create that action plan for the response that is coming ahead. So the importance of persons to volunteer, it cannot be understated.
Now, the person touched a bit on accountability. How do you, especially after going through certain disasters or certain events, I should say, not necessarily disasters, but events where you had to be involved, how do you account for this is what we did right, this is what we did wrong, this is what we're not going to do again? Do you have that accountability in place?
Yes. So after every incident, our department conducts an internal debriefing, right, where we look at the incident from inception. So time of call, what the dispatchers did, how the responders responded, what the action plan was, what they did, what they didn't do. And what it helps us to do is to identify where we may have performance gaps. And that is done at every level. Small incidents, medium incidents, large incidents. Even when we deploy as a team, we come back and we debrief on the event itself, because you will never get everything 100% right. So there is a need to dissect it, break it down to see what went well, and it helps you then to identify those gaps to improve for the next time. So yes, we do have that level of accountability.
Okay. From your end, do you have accountability, especially within the DM, within the various communities and the different constituency boundaries?
Yes, similarly, whenever there is an impact, or whenever, even if there's a training program, as my colleague has indicated, there will always be gaps. And the only way you can address those gaps is if you carry out a thorough evaluation and appraisal in the entire incident or training program or whatever you have done. So therefore, by doing so, we can then address those gaps that may be identified. But it can't help but, since we have fire service, and when persons are speaking about volunteerism, one of the tasks of the DOs is to help identify the various fire hydrants across the country. Now, if I was to ask a number of citizens, do you know where the nearest fire hydrant to your home is? The majority will say no, because they don't see it as an important issue until it is needed. So what the DOs, as part of our collaborative efforts to assist the fire service, is that if we have been able to identify where those fire hydrants are, and using the various technology to have it mapped and share that information with the fire service, when they turn up at an incident, the DOs are not going to operate the truck. They're not. Some may be trained to help them roll out the hose or whatever, but they can say, Officer Bayne, there's a fire hydrant just 50 yards or 200 yards down the road, and that would assist them significantly, either to run a direct feed or to replenish one of the appliances. So how do we get the community to understand that now has to be part of their, I would say responsibility, but they need to start acquainting themselves with that type of information so that when something happens, you can assist the authorities, and in this case, the fire service. And the DOs, that is one of the requirements. We have a concept that we call community profiling. How can you adequately service the needs of a community unless you know what is in that community? And that would include the drainage systems, the wells, how effective they are, speaking to residents to find out how they are working, because the residents will give you as much information that we need, that we can pass that information on to the relevant agencies. Where are the fire extinguishers? Where are the fire hydrants? Do persons know, or are they equipped with fire extinguishers in their homes and smoke detectors? Do they know how to use them? Have they been able to identify the vulnerable persons in the respective communities so that when something happens, you have that knowledge ahead of the impact, so you can mount an adequate response if you have to take persons or lead persons away from that area that they will be impacted. So when we speak about volunteerism, I'm quite certain that you would agree that this is not something that you're going to be paid to do. But the community benefits significantly from the work that the DOs are charged to do, and that is how we assist the regulatory agencies until they arrive on scene. So volunteerism is today it is calling for a lot more, because there is greater risk than we would have had before. And the more we educate and share the knowledge and let persons understand how they will benefit. How will you benefit from the information that we share with you? By internalizing it that way, I think we were prone to get more persons coming on board.
Now, when the persons do come on board, what are some of the roles that they fill, though? Because I'm sure it's not just like come on board and they just volunteer willy-nilly. What are some of these key roles that persons fit into within these volunteer associations, or the part of the volunteerism within these associations?
All right, within the scope of our training, we have first aid, because that is always needed. How do you identify vulnerable persons and you list them? How to safely use a chainsaw. Fire suppression, as my colleague has just indicated. How to use the emergency radio communication system, because communication is key. And we have just added psychological first aid, because usually persons who are responders, you are repeatedly open to and exposed to hurt and persons injured or whatever. So psychological first aid helps arm you to how you will cope with that type of environment, because it is something that first responders and persons who are first on scene, that you would be exposed to that, and so it helps you to get around that. Incident command is something that we have been introduced of recently, because when we go on scene, we have to relate to the emergency services, whose part of their mandate is covered within the incident command structure. So we very much try to expose the members of the DOs, and that's why I'm calling for more persons to come on board. Mass casualty management is something that is going to be widely introduced beginning in the new year, and also how we can relate to persons' communication. We talk about communication with the emergency radio, but we now need to sharpen the skills of the individual DOs and how you communicate with the general public so that you can share the information. How can you convince or persuade them to come on board by letting them know the benefits that they can derive from being a DO, and also the benefits that the country would generally achieve by building higher levels of resilience. And it starts in the community. It starts in the home. The community is a composition and a compilation of many homes. Island is a combination and compilation of a number of communities. So it is a process, and we are all committed to making sure that Barbados strives to seek higher levels of community resilience.
Okay, and with that, we take our next commercial break and be back to continue our discussion. and welcome back to the People's Business. As we discuss volunteerism, especially in disaster emergency management, we're empowering our communities through volunteerism. That is our topic this evening. And just to remind you of my guests with me, I have Officer Damian. I had a little lapse there. Damian Bayne from the Barbados Fire Service and Mrs. Selwyn Brooks, who is a consultant with disaster emergency management. I'm also encouraging you to join our discussion at 228-5562 and 228-5563. Now, as we speak of volunteerism, we now go into a special event you have coming up on December the 7th. I think Officer Bayne, maybe you can enlighten me a bit more as to this event and how persons can get involved.
So the event is geared at displaying the capacity of the persons within the DEOs, the different skill sets that they would have acquired over the years, just to show the public how they can function in times of emergency. So like we mentioned before, they're trained in the use of the chainsaw, how to use the portable radio for communications, fire safety, specifically the use of the portable fire extinguisher and the fire blanket, and a number of other areas, first aid and stuff like that. So when you come to the event, you will see them demonstrate these skill sets on their own. And our department, we came on board when the request came in to help them prepare for the fire safety aspect of it. So it will be a fun-filled day. A lot will be learned as well, and I encourage the public to come out on the 7th of December.
Okay, the Officer Bayne gave us insight as to what's happening, but where is this event? What time will it begin? What is it actually? What's the aim and what's the involvement of everybody else?
Yes, the event is happening on December the 7th at the Leicester 1 School and Kindergarten. We will start approximately around 9:30 and go through to around 4 o'clock. Included in the day's activities, as Officer Bayne has indicated, it is organized, managed, and produced by DOs. It is intended to showcase what the DOs can do, what is their level of capacity, all leading up to the concept of how we can encourage more persons to come on board by seeing what the DOs can do. It is very important. We see it at the department as very important because the DOs form an integral part of the department's community response mechanism. And I'm quite certain Officer Bayne would share this view that when a fire occurs in the community, some person has to call the fire service. But if the community, being in collaboration with the DOs, can mount a response and reduce or extinguish the fire, it means that when Officer Bayne arrive on the scene, the matter has been reduced or extinguished. And then they will determine what is safe or whatever. So basically, the exercise on the 7th, we have DOs who are coming from all over the country. There has been a high level of enthusiasm to the various training sections that were held leading up to it. This coming weekend, we're going to have what we call a dry run, so that you will take persons through the paces, so that come December 7th, we want to make sure that we're on point and everything is effectively executed and demonstrated what we, the DOs, can do.
Now, you speak about what the DEOs can do, but are you truly effectively, especially with persons coming in to volunteer, how important is it to educate these persons? Because do they really know what they have to do at this stage? I mean, outside of having to come into this event that you're having, how important is education so you know that they're actually equipped and that you are equipped as well to deal with the interaction with these volunteers?
Well, the education is important. What you would find is that, well, what we do is we try to marry the response aspect to it in terms of being able to use the extinguisher along with the fire prevention information. Because from where we sit, we value the interaction with the DEOs when we have to train them. Why? Because they're also vessels that can take the information back to the communities. So while we're giving them that information where you will see them use the extinguisher practically, We also include the fire prevention aspect so that when they go back to the communities, because these persons are parts of other groups. They go to church, they play sports, some of them still work, and we're hoping that the information that we impart on them, they then take it back to the communities, and hopefully then you will continue to see that change in behavior. So the education, and that goes for any capacity, any skill set, is very important, because we often tell people, look, you come to the fire service and you may learn this information through the DEOs or through your business place or whatever, whoever you came through. But the reality is that this is information that you can use at home for yourself and you can share with your family members. And what it does is that it makes the community more fire safe. So the education is priceless. You cannot understate it. And as we continue as a department, we will continue to support the DEM and by extension the DEOs. I would like to see more DEOs come on board because we do not engage with all of them, but they can reach out to us through Mr. Brooks or they can contact us directly, and we are always happy to engage them and train them.
One of the things is you spoke of the volunteers coming forward, but let's look at the basic public education element of it, because sometimes you find with a fire persons just running to the house to save a person, not thinking about, you know, the risks that they're taking to themselves. These basic elements as well, public education, instead of just the volunteers that will come to want to learn the education, want to learn what you have to offer, but just having that publicly out there. How is that public education element?
Right. So we have a fire prevention and code enforcement unit that pretty much create different programs that go into communities to disseminate that information. But if there are any community groups or any persons, even single people, can contact us and we can make that training available, because our role is saving lives. That's primary. And any person that we can train and we can give them the information to make their homes safer, make their workplaces safer, then it's helping us to achieve our mission in protecting lives. So we are always available. I would say every station, every fire officer is a fire prevention officer. Let me add that, because we're all trained in fire suppression and also fire extinguishment. So you can approach any of us and have that conversation. And let us continue to do that to make the community safer.
And from your end, Mr. Brooks, in terms of public education, we know the persons who usually volunteer come because they want to learn that information. But how about getting the information just generally out there?
Yes, a number of the DOs have embarked on a number of initiatives. One of those initiatives leading up to our activity on December 7th is one of the zones that is predominantly St. Philip and the Christchurch area. They will be mounting a display at Emerald City on the 23rd. Now that is primarily an educational forum. It may be speaking to what the DOs can do, but it's also allowing the general public who will go to that establishment to see and to hear, and this forms part of our outreach program. DOs are charged to engage the PTAs, engage the schools, engage the various community groups, and charge them if you do not necessarily have the information by yourself. The fire service, the police, the social worker, the probation officer, you get the point where they make it the polyclinic. These are agencies that we can draw on that will bring the relevant information to educate the general public as to what they need to know. And one of the highlights of the upcoming activity on the 7th is for our visitors. When I say visitors, non-DO members, you're going to have the opportunity to get a prize or two by displaying how you believe that you can respond to one or two scenarios that we will have. So I'm not going to let you pick out the bag and let you know what it is, but it is an exciting way of engaging those persons who will come, and with the hope that they will see the need to join the DO. Some people might not be able to join it and offer the hours that maybe we would like, but Officer Bayne he lives in St. Thomas. Um, if I was responsible for St. Thomas as one of the units, I would be targeting him. He will not necessarily join, but he will offer advice and solutions and come to the meetings and share the information. So people have the opportunity that they can engage with DDOs in several ways. Just call the department at 438-7575. Speak to any of the program officers or any members of staff, and they will put you on to the relevant personnel. If you want to offer your services, if you want to get information, if you want us to come to you, and also if you want to make a level of donation to us as well. Because, as I said, the department will never be able to give the DOs what they want. But what better way for the DOs to engage the various business sector in our respective communities, and by a collaborative effort. We help you to prepare your emergency plans or to help to sensitize your staff as what they need to do or what they can do. We help to facilitate necessary training, and you would in turn offer some level of sponsorship for some of the kit and gear that we might need that we might not always be able to get from the national budget, especially at the time when we need it most. And outfitting 1,000 persons and more, because I'm not selling for the 1,000. I would like to see within the DOs that we can raise to 1,500. It is not an unrealistic figure, considering that St. Michael, we have the closely knit community, so we need more people in St. Michael. But as you go into rural Barbados, you may not need as much as we will want in St. Michael, but we will now need persons with higher levels of expertise, because in those areas, the topography of the land dictates that certain skill sets and search and rescue would be more applicable for St. Andrew and St. Joseph because of the terrain and slippage and houses going down to the gully. You're not going to see much of that in St. Michael. You will mostly see flooding. Right. So these are some of the areas. Damage assessment. Whenever the country is impacted, there's a process that the DOs work in collaboration with the Barbados Statistical Service to effectively carry out different levels of assessment at various junctures to make sure that the entities is armed with the information of what has happened so that they can effectively mount their response to it. So you see the DOs form a very important function within the community. So I would like to appeal to as many Bajans as possible. Come and join us. We need you. You can benefit from your engagement with us. You and your family can benefit from the training that you receive, that you will be able to assist yourself and your family and collectively the wider community. So everyone, come on out, join with us, and help us to make Barbados more disaster or hazard resilient to whatever may come to our way.
So you heard that call from Mr. Brooks. We need you to come on out. And do you have a caller who wants to join the discussion? Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Hearing this program coming over the TV, it drew back to my attention that when I was a boy growing up, they used to have an H nailed onto the closest hydrant in the area, that any person will identify it, that the fire station, if there's a fire in the area, they will know directly where this H are, because it had the hydrant identified where the hydrant are. So I hearing it on the TV here now, it just draw my
and welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we were discussing disaster management and volunteerism. Gentlemen, we're about to wrap up our discussion now. Let me start with you, Officer Bayne. You do have that big session on December 7th at the Lessavon School. What are some of the key things that you want persons to really get out of that event?
Well, the importance of volunteerism, one. We need more persons to come out and volunteer for the volunteer agencies, especially the DEOs. Get a sense of the importance of what they do and the importance to the community. The more persons we have within the DEOs that are trained in the various areas relating to emergency management, then if we are impacted, then we are sure that we have persons in the communities that can mount a response, obviously with a limited scope, but they can mount a response nevertheless and feed critical information into the Disaster Management Command Center. When they come out on the 7th, they will get to see what the DEOs have to offer and coming out of their training sessions. And maybe they will see something that will pique their interest and they will want to join. And I do encourage you to join.
Well, thank you. And for you, Mr. Brooks, I'm going to let you be the person to get persons outside of this event to come and volunteer with disaster emergency management, knowing that we do have a lot of natural disasters coming our way. Climate change can send anything our way. We're not immune to hail. We're not immune to tornadoes. We're not immune to those systems. So what is your final appeal to persons to volunteer within this segment or sector of Barbados?
I would like to make a special appeal for Barbados to come out and to see what the DOs is capable of doing. Come and see some of these areas that training is offered in. Come and be part of the camaraderie, because within the DOs, it is like a family. We look after each other, or we encourage persons to look after each other, so that if you have that fostering into the various communities, how can we now take that fellowship into the community and engage members of the community? So come on out and see what are the components that we strive under our remit to offer the country and the Department of Emergency Management best practices in comprehensive disaster management. And in so doing, you will learn something. And once you have learned some aspect of it, in our evaluation form, there is an evaluation form that we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you how you thought the exercise was, any suggestion how you think we can make it better, and also if you think we should host events like this more frequently and at different areas in the country. That is the type of information that we would like to hear from you. And last but not least, Barbados will be impacted someday. What part do you have to play in it? That's the question that we all must start asking ourselves. What can I do to help my household, my community, my country to withstand or to better able to cope with whatever comes? And it has to be as a collective approach and a collective effort and a collective attitude. That is not the government of the day, regardless of whatever government it is. It is not only the responsibility of the fire service and the police and the defense force or any of the other response agencies. We now have to see it as everybody coming together and seeing how we can gain from the knowledge that is required so that we can offer the country higher levels of community resilience. So come on board, ladies and gentlemen, and I look forward to seeing you as well.
I'll see. Once I get the time for work, I will be there.
Officer Ben and I were sending an email requesting your presence.
Well, thank you. I definitely would. I would really like it. That day off would be great for me. Thank you so much.
Considered it done.
Thank you. And I also want to thank you for joining me tonight, Officer Bayne from the Barbados Fire Service and Mr. Brooks from the Disaster Emergency Management. These two men are very integral when it comes to Barbados being prepared for any disaster, whether it be natural or man-made. And tonight we're looking at volunteerism, how you can get involved as well. And just remember that they do have a big event at the Lessavon School on December 7th, starting at 9 a.m. running through to about 5 p.m. so you can get a little more insight into disaster management and how you can play your part. I'm Anne-Marie Burke, and on behalf of my production team as well as my guests, thank you once again. This has been The People's Business.